So it's been almost 6 months since I've done a big scripted video like this.
I'm not usually one to try and date my videos. I'd like to think that no matter when people watch them, the video will still be just as relevant as when I first made it. But you know, what have I been doing these past 6 months?
This is what I've been doing, dying over and over and over again. Jeez.
The Souls games are considered by many to be some of the hardest games out there. Unlike other modern titles, these games show no mercy to players. They're incredibly punishing, but also incredibly rewarding. And that last part is why I love them so much. A game isn't nearly as satisfying when you just breeze through it and have no real connection to anything going on. You can argue that games like Heavy Rain or The Walking Dead are good at getting players emotionally engaged, and I would agree, but I think the best way for a player to get engaged in an interactive medium is, well, to interact with it. When I decided to take the plunge into the Souls series, I decided to start with Demon Souls, and boy oh boy did I get the welcome. I think I might have spent over 3 hours on this first level alone, dying over and over again. But every time I died, I learned something. Hold up my shield here, watch for this trap here, don't fight the Red Eye Knight over here or you'll get skewered by his new favorite toy. And it's that sort of learning that makes these games so brilliant. Death isn't a punishment, it's a tool. You can always recover the souls you lost so long as you learn from your mistakes.
And because of that, I don't think the Souls games are as hard as people say they are. I mean, they're not impossible, right? They just have a lot to teach you.
So let's use that first level as an example. My first Souls level, the first level of Demon Souls, the first level of Balatarian Palace. Are these games cheap, or do players just have a lot to learn? The first thing you'll probably notice after the tutorial is that you're stuck at half health. Because you died in the tutorial, your body's stuck in soul form. Dark Souls changed this by only affecting your health bar if you got cursed. Either way, being in half health really sucks, because now a few hits is all it takes for you to die. The first few enemies in the level are the easiest in the game. Just like how Super Mario Bros. Throws a Goomba at you so you learn how to jump, Demon Souls throws some of the most basic enemies at you so that way you understand how all the controls work. These guys, known as Dreglings, are either going to swipe at you once with their sword or do a crazy flurry of slashes. The swipe is a very easy attack to learn how to parry and riposte with, and the flurry is a very easy attack to get behind and backstab with. Both of those mechanics are relatively advanced, and you can certainly beat the game without them, but they're learned best right here on this first stairwell. Even if you don't learn those techniques, it teaches you about how the mechanics introduced in the tutorial work together. The game may have told you to lock on with R3 and block with the left bumper, but those mechanics work best when used together. The flurry move is probably best dodged by either moving away from it or rolling, because if you just sit there and eat up all the hits with your shield, you're likely to run out of stamina. When you roll or dodge, the enemy just stands there for a second before executing another attack, giving you the chance to strike. Because of this, the game has taught you that if you dodge attacks, enemies are likely to have a longer recovery time, giving you the chance to retaliate. And even if you don't perfect backstabbing, you'd still know that attacking an enemy's rear is more likely to connect than attacking an enemy's front.
These guys might be the best first enemies in a game I've ever encountered.
As you move up the stairwell, you'll have to deal with multiple Dreglings at once. Now that the game knows you can effectively dispatch one of these guys, it's time to test that skill by throwing 2 of them at you. This forces players to switch targets and multitask. This test goes even further. Going around the corner, you find an enemy with a crossbow accompanying 2 of these basic mooks. Understanding how to manage multiple types of enemies at once is imperative to mastering this game, as it's used in almost every level, almost with this exact sort of setup. This further tests your ability to multitask while teaching you about the new enemy type. While going through this level, the pace is almost entirely determined by the player. The Souls games emphasize defense more than anything else. If you can't dodge or defend against attacks appropriately, well, you might as well be dead. That's why the game makes sure to never give you more enemies than you can handle. Later levels can swarm you with a massive amount of incredibly mobile enemies if you're not careful, because it knows that you understand enough about the game's mechanics to effectively deal with that situation. In this first level, because you don't know everything yet, there's more than enough space to deal with one combat scenario at a time. As you continue to progress through the level, more and more basic enemy types are introduced. Enemies hiding around corners, enemies with better shields, enemies throwing firebombs, enemies with different weapons, and every time these enemies are introduced in an isolated environment first, before being combined with other enemies to test the knowledge just learned. Eventually you make it to this bridge, where we can see a blue-eyed knight a short ways away. Like other new enemies, he's separated from the other enemies on the bridge, so that way you don't get unfairly attacked while trying to understand this new foe. The Blue-Eyed Knight hits pretty hard, depleting a significant amount of health when you get hit. He also moves very fast compared to other enemies encountered so far. Another problem is his shield, which blocks a significant amount of damage, but because of what you learned, he's not as bad as he looks. Every class in the game starts with a melee weapon and a shield, and every class in the game requires mastery of a melee weapon and shield. This knight also has a melee weapon and shield. In fact, he's very similar to the player in many ways, but there's one key difference between this Blue-Eyed Knight and the player.
He hasn't learned anything yet.
Blue Eyes here doesn't know nearly as much as you do about Souls game mechanics. After the encounters with the Dreglings, Boletarian Knights, and Crossbow Knights, you learn very quickly that Demon Souls is not so much action as it is tactics. Like a foolish player way over his head, Blue Eyes is incredibly aggressive with his combat, rushing towards the player and executing strong attacks. But while strong attacks are powerful, they also are slow and drain a lot of stamina, leaving a lot of openings for retaliation.
Isn't it amazing how all this turns around?
This is the test, and everything before this was the lesson. If you know the mechanics of the game that these guys taught you, defeating this guy should be no sweat. When Blue Eyes gets desperate, he tries to heal in a last-ditch effort to try and survive, but just like the enemies in Demon Souls don't stop and wait for you to heal, you won't show this knight any mercy either. With a few final attacks in the upper hand, it becomes obvious that while Blue Eyes might seem intimidating, he can easily be bested with the proper planning and skill.
And that's how all of Demon Souls works.
You walk into a room and see something absolutely mind-blowing and have no idea how to beat it. After some careful observation, you observe a pattern and begin to strategize. Soon enough, you find a weakness and are able to exploit it with whatever tools you have available. It's this sort of strategy that really sets the Souls games apart from other titles. These games aren't hard, they just require a lot of precision and thinking. Blue Eyes was blocking a fog gate that allows us to progress to the second portion of the level, but there's also another path if we continue to walk down the bridge. This leads to a descending staircase ending in a switch that opens a gate leading right back to the start of the level.
Like I said, Blue Eyes was the test. Now that we passed the test, there's no reason for us to replay that first section anymore.
Unlocking this shortcut also rewards us with a Cling Ring, which increases our health bar and soul form. This means that not only are we rewarded for our hard work, the game can also now be far more confident in throwing more difficult challenges at us because we have a larger health bar. So you go through the fog gate and go through the next part. You meet a guy named Ostrava, maybe help him out, and you kill some more basic enemies, generally in higher quantities than before. Then, as you see the next fog gate, you look up and see yet another Blue-Eyed Knight. Another test. The first Blue Eyes was the test for the first section of the level, but he was also teaching you skills you would need to know for later in the level. Just like the beginning of the stage where you had to deal with multiple Dreglings at once after being introduced to them earlier on, you now have to fight a Blue-Eyed Knight on stairs while an enemy with a crossbow fires on us. Getting behind him will be more difficult, but understanding his moveset makes defeating him much easier. Even if you die here, all of the enemies will still respawn, including the first Blue Eyes at the first fog gate. Even with the shortcut, you'll still have to fight him again on the way to the tougher encounter on the stairs. So if beating the first Blue Eyes was luck initially, it won't be by the time you beat this new one. It's this never-ending cycle of teaching and testing that makes Demon Souls such an incredible joy to analyze. You get surprised by a cannonball rolling down the stairs here, but you can use that to defeat a ton of enemies over here. You see a dragon in the opening cutscene to find it relaxing on the cliff face later in the level, and can be less intimidated by a dragon attack on the nearby bridge. You learn about getting behind enemies when fighting the Dreglings, soldiers, and Blue-Eyed Knights, and then have to face the Hoplites, which can only be defeated by getting behind them. Even the encounter with the first Blue Eyes is even further expanded on by an optional Red-Eye Knight fight nearby, with the door to one of the hardest melee encounters in the game right behind him. Once you get through a majority of the stage, the boss door opens right at the start, once again reinforcing the idea that players pass the test and don't need to replay an area they mastered. It's time for the final exam. Meet Phalanx, an incredibly strange looking amalgamation of enemies we already encountered earlier in the stage with a bright glowing core in the center. As mentioned previously, the Hoplites are best beaten from behind, but in the Phalanx encounter this is nigh impossible because of how they all move together. Typical melee strategies don't work either because you can't parry or backstab these guys, and once again you can't get behind them. There's no visible weakness here either. The mob of enemies just slides towards you. There's no point where the core is openly exposed, at least not until a few of these hoplites are destroyed. It seems like everything learned before this fight is thrown out the window. None of the combat strategies you know are working. Maybe Demon Souls is just an incredibly hard, cheap game after all. Or maybe not. When fighting the Dreglings and the soldiers and the knights, the one element that was absolutely imperative to success was identifying a pattern. The Dreglings always stopped after the flurry move. The Blue-Eyed Knight had slow attacks. Was there a larger pattern that we overlooked? Because phalanx and the hoplites don't do too much damage, it makes evading them and going into the menus much easier. In the inventory, you'll find some items that enemies drop during your trek through the level. There's a lot of grass, maybe some new weapons, but the key standouts are fire bombs and turpentine, both of which are offensive fire weapons. The turpentine was actually dropped by the hoplites encountered earlier in the level, solidifying this connection. Could it be that the enemies of this level hold the very thing needed to defeat the boss? It's a stretch, but it works. Both the hoplites and phalanx itself are incredibly weak to fire, making for a relatively painless fight with the help of the fire bombs and turpentine.
Now you might think that having to go into the menus to figure out how to beat this boss might be a bit too difficult, cheap even. But that's what makes the Souls games stand out. Unlike something like 3D Zelda, where there's a clear divide between puzzles and combat, Demon Souls and Dark Souls marry the two together.
The note system also plays a pivotal role here. There are a lot of times in the game when the solution to a combat scenario may not be very obvious, but because other players can leave messages with basic phrases or sentences, it allows for the online community to assist new players without outright giving them solutions. It also provides an incredible learning opportunity. In games like Skyrim or Fallout, players tend to disregard most of their item pickups because in many cases they don't really do anything useful. That's far from the truth in the Souls games. It's important to pay attention to what items you pick up and even where you got them, because all that information can be really useful later on. But really, whether it's figuring out the secret to beating the Blue-Eyed Knight or the item to take down Phalanx, they both have a similar sense of accomplishment attached to them. Whether it took you 2 tries or 20 tries, it was still you who did it in the end. There is no super guide or invincibility leaf to show you mercy because the Souls games show no one mercy. But that doesn't make them cheap or unfair either. It's this trust in the player combined with incredible level design that makes these games so engaging. And that's just the first level. There's still a whole game after this. I may have died dozens of times in the first stage of Boletaria, but after beating Phalanx, I immediately ran ahead to the second part to get repeatedly killed all over again. Now I'm playing through Dark Souls, doing the exact same thing. And when I pick up Bloodborne and the Dark Souls sequels, it's likely to be a very similar story.
So anyway, that's what I've been doing the past 6 months. What about you?
I thank you so much for watching this video on Demon Souls. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed making it, even if it maybe took me a bit longer than I would have liked. I hope it, gave you a new perspective on a game you either have played before, haven't played before, and if you haven't played it, I highly suggest you do, even though it may seem intimidating at first. I promise that you will come to enjoy it over time. Speaking of Demon Souls, I have 2 videos linked here, and one of them is actually about Demon Souls, and it's not on this channel, because I haven't made any other Demon Souls videos on this channel. But this is actually a race of Demon Souls being hosted on my friend Ringtail Randall's channel, Ringtailed Randall that is. And he and I are basically taking 2 completely different initial classes and character builds and going in 2 completely different directions, but the goal is to see who can beat all the demons and beat the final boss first, and see not only which player is better, but which build style is better, and how we deal with all the obstacles that we face throughout our journey. So it's a tale of 2 souls. It's not just this is better than a race. It's a journey. So take the journey. If the video's out, it'll be linked. When it releases, it will be linked. And if it's not there and you can't click on it, then you can just click on this little avatar icon on the top. It's right in the top in the middle, little Tanuki man. Click on it, go there, it's awesome. On the right, I have a completely different video, but it's on my channel, and it's the first of a 6-part commentary on Captain Toad Treasure Tracker for the Nintendo Wii U. I find the game to be very underrated, but I also find that we can learn a lot from both the successes and failures of that game, and I hope we can take a lot from it and learn from it and maybe look at games in different ways in the future. The 6th part of that is going to be coming out soon. I'm working on it, and it hopefully won't take as long as it took me to get this stupid video out. If you're on mobile, mobile annotations I think are a thing, and if I can get it to work then I will, but for right now there's also an eye in the upper right corner, and you can click on that and basically reach all of these things that I just described here. I hope that I can get this next scripted video, I can get these things out more frequently than 8 months, because even when I recorded the script it said 6 months, but then I had to go over in editing for 8 months. It's crazy. It takes a while to make these things. So thank you all so much for watching again. I'm not gonna keep you waiting any longer.
if you look, like, I'm going to turn the camera now to see over here. Like, this is just a lounge, and then someone dropped all their crap here. No one wants that. This is just a stupid lounge. Like, so, there's not even a TV. Like, the whole point was there's supposed to be a TV. There's not even a TV. Not even a TV. So that's the secret.